So I did want to do this during the daytime when I had more light to work with. Again, apparently not an option because Amazon decided not to bother telling me, hey, your stuff got here, go get it from the main house. And I'll tell you more about the property at a later time. But I'm just going to go ahead and get into this. Like I said, it should be fairly simple. I've shut off all the power everywhere. If I turn on the inverter, if there was any kind of, like, if I had left the panels on and there was just a little bit of leakage or anything like that, the little fan would kick on every so often. Um, there's no voltage anywhere. This place is dead. I turned off both batteries. I killed the panels. Generator's not running. I'm not plugged into anything. But we're going to keep that off anyways because that's the smart thing to do. So, yeah, what I want to do is finish, I've already got the green wire unhooked. I got the white one loosened up. That just comes off these two bus bars. And then the last one, and even though we know it's dead, always treat electricity like it's alive, okay? If you don't, the minute that you don't do that is the minute that you missed something and you get a shock. So what I always like to do, these, again, not as important, but I like to get a little tape over the top of my wires. It's not like, we're not taping it, to keep it professional and all that. We're just, you don't want one of these wires knocking in there and crossing over something or something like that. So a little piece of tape gives you a little bit of insurance that something stupid doesn't happen. So, and I'm not loving these screws. I'll show you in a minute, but these are like these weird flathead square BS screws. So you're going to be seeing the back of my head while I fight with this one because, well, on top of everything else, I don't have the right size screwdriver with me. Now you can pop the breaker out. As you can see, the breaker moves pretty easily. You can pop it out of its home. But in a case like this, it's actually easier to leave it where it is. So it just gives me a little bit of leverage. But they normally will snap. They'll snap. This one's different. Maybe they pull straight out. They're a little different than what I think I thought they were. Now, I saw this when I was looking at the problem, and I started unwrapping it, and I don't know why in the world they did this. They gave us a double lead. One is spoken for, the other is not. No idea what the point of that is. Now, under normal circumstances, I would love to put crimps on the end of my wire. Something nice for, all the screws to grab to. We're not in that situation today. So, we'll probably end up coming back in at a later time. I'll throw some kind of crimp on things just to make me feel warm and fuzzy about it. But really, as long as you do it properly, it shouldn't be a big deal. So, a little piece of tape. Now, like if I'm working on a house, like house wiring, and I'm working on a ceiling light that's got a switch, I'll turn the switch off and put a piece of tape over the switch. And that's to help keep people from walking in and doing something stupid like, oh, well, it's so dark in here, click, zap. And you learn these things from experience. Sounded like somebody was trying to pull up into my neighborhood of the property. Not that anybody can get up here with all this stupid mud. Another thing to keep in mind is the proper way normally to deal with this would be to unhook it from the board, blah, blah. Guess what? We're not doing, because I don't feel like fighting with it. So we're just gonna, you don't want to get your snippers in on the boards and stuff in here. There's boards and a capacitor and all sorts of jazz that can store energy in bad days. So, just kind of be aware and of where your cutters are and all that. And I know you can't see it. There we go. So like I've got to really kind of wedge in here and try to stay off anything metallic, because oh sweet, Don, did I drop that? No. Okay. I'm kind of working flying blind here, so so you can see capacitors, you can see, the boards, transformers in there, right there. Like this, all this stuff holds electricity. It stores it. The big old honking, what are those, 200 volt, 200 volt capacitors, and there's two of those bad boys. Like this thing holds electricity to deal with the major buffers. So you really don't want to be poking and prodding your fingers in there without, discharging it properly. Again, not an option today. So, yeah. All right. So that's going to the garbage. Although I might just leave it out and whatever. And again, if I was watching this, I would be like, dude, this is the worst camera work ever. Once we get some power, like I'll show you where I've had to jam the camera in here and be working. But now these are number 10 strippers, number 6 wires, because nothing can go according to plan. So we're just going to have to be very gentle about our snipping of the insulation so we don't get into the wire itself. You can also use the old knife trick. Damn, it's raining so much. I'm glad at least it's somewhat warm. But you're trying not to get in on the wire. You don't want to clip out wire, because the wire is what carries your voltage, and if you clip down the wire, where'd my knife go? Wow, I've lost everything. There it is. If you clip down the wire too much, you're cutting down on how much wire you have to carry the voltage and the amperage. Volts and amps are very, very important to know about, especially when it comes to solar. Anything DC gets really finicky about the size of the wire. AC, because it's such high voltage and such low amperage, as a rule of thumb, it's actually a lot less of a problem. Your volts times amps equals watts. And so when you're thinking about this, like this wire, you could push 100 volts at 3 amps. Easy peasy all day long. Or you pull 12 volts at 35 amps and you're pushing its limits. Again, not preferred method of having to work. Especially because I'm trying to be so careful with this insulation and wire. Because if I screw this up, I do not have a plan B except to go without any power, because everything is unhooked, until I can get down to the store tomorrow. Now, I'm gonna take a look at things. We want to make sure that the depth on this will be good enough. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. Oh, look, yeah, it's good enough. All right, let's get this other one done. So, you don't want to cut back too much insulation so that you have bare wire sticking out of the terminal block here, because that's unprotected. And as high school, middle school health class taught you, unprotected is bad. So You want to make sure you're not stripping more wire than what's necessary, but also doing enough to get a good grab. This stuff is miserable. It's like this cheap plastic. It's not rubbery like a good insulation normally would be. It's like plasticky, and so it does not cut nicely. Because RV companies don't care about giving you good quality stuff. Like, this is aluminum wire. Realistically, even 35 amps is probably pushing its limits pretty heavily because it's aluminum. If it was all copper, it could handle it without an issue. But, and that's why when building solar, it's so important to, use quality wire, because it changes what size wire you got to run. You might, for your inverter, if you're running a big old inverter, you may have to run OT2, OT4, in order to cover even a foot, because of, it's aluminum. But if you go to welding cable, actual copper copper cable, you might only need 0 or 2 gauge. So, it's important to pay attention to these things, and yeah, the copper's more expensive, but if it cuts down on cost because you were able to get a smaller gauge wire, then it's usually a pretty good idea. You can kind of see there's like 2 hairs here. I did get a little too far in. It's not enough for me to warrant being overly worried about it. So, what we'll do is we'll pull these to the side. I kind of want to dry fit this and make sure I don't have too much wire, but I do have enough to do the trick. I noticed it doesn't fit in here nearly as nicely as I'd like, and I don't know what the deal is. It looks like it's just kind of hanging up and stuff in here, or maybe that's just it. That's the size. So I may have to come back and bend these tabs down or out. It was supposed to be direct replacement. It's not seeming to work out that way, though. Yeah. So even that, not quite. So I'm probably going to end up pulling this out at some point, and I could probably do it now, come to think of it. Do I have the... I don't think I have the tools up here to do it. Yeah, I'm going to have to pull this out at another time and bend these tabs, cut these tabs off something, because they're holding me out quite a bit. So I'm going to have to be careful for a few days till I get around to it, or a few months, depending on how much my ADD kicks in the meantime. Go ahead and just do a quick dry run. You want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. These are looking good. I'd say that's good enough to do the trick. So I'm happy with that. So what we're going to do is red to red, white to black. Triple stranded aluminum wire. Not my favorite. I'm not loving how much slack I have to work with here. I don't know if I can pull a little. Again, you want to act like it's live. In this case, I'm hoping and praying that it is indeed dead, like I think it is. So now we gotta get this loosened up. You don't want to go crazy with loosening it. You want to do enough that it'll cover getting the wire in there comfortably, so that you can pinch it down nice, but not so much that like things are gonna get mushed and moved and squished and moved, and just a little bit more than what you actually need in order to get the wire in. It's miserable. So I'm just gonna feed the wire in here. I know you can't really see what I'm doing. That wasn't nearly loose enough. But here's, gotta love working in the dark. A little extra light, an unnoticeable amount of light. Wow. Okay, that moved on me. I'm sorry. Alright, so that should be a little bit better. Well, yeah. Should be and is are two different things, I guess. Again, wishing I could do this in the light where you could actually see what the hell I'm doing a little bit better, but I'm working in the dark, so you get a video in the dark. Just want to slide it in there, make sure all your wires are actually in there nice and straight, so they don't get all crammed out through the sides and stuff. Just tighten it down. You can get on the screw because you can't see the screw because it's in the shadow. And because get your wrong glasses on. Bring it down snug, fairly snug, not overly snug. Usually check it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Again, you're not looking to crush everything. You're just looking to make sure that it doesn't pull out and make an electrical mess. We'll just do the same with this one. Make sure everybody's nice and straight. Put you in the hole. Slides in nice, easy peasy. Hold it nice and straight while you start snugging it down. Now, if you notice that these screws end up going down a significant different amount, then that means that likely you got the insulation in underneath your screw on the one that doesn't go in nearly as far. So make sure when you look at them that they look somewhat even. In my case, they do not. It could just be a visual thing. They're about there, now they're even enough. Okay. This thing's got, it's got exposure here. I don't love that, to be 100% honest. Anything that's left exposed makes me kind of crazy. I'm not gonna lie. So I like to wrap a little bit of tape around something like this, just to make sure that nothing, no wires, no screws, no nothing kind of sneak in there and cross something, zap and fire. In theory, because you've got fuses and stuff, if something were to short, those fuses should catch it and shut everything down. But if you can do anything to mitigate risk, you should. That makes me feel a little better about that. Those are in there nice. Give them a little tuggy tug. Those are good. Now we're going to shove you back in the hole. Shove these guys up through here. So before we do that, let's go ahead and strip them back. Oh, they look like they're probably, they're not 12 gauge for sure. I would say they're probably 16. When in doubt, start with the bigger gauge on your strippers and work your way backwards. Actually, that took a couple of, maybe they're 14s. because I took a couple of strands and I don't like that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a second shot, bring it up to 14 this time. It's a little on the wrong side, but there. Okay. Start with a bigger gauge than what you think it might be, because worst case scenario, it's just not going to cut into the wire. It'll only cut some or most of the insulation. You can come back in with a slightly smaller size. Otherwise, you end up doing what I did on that first one, which is trimming the wire and redoing it. Now, AC home wiring actually severely prefers single contact. In other words, it prefers a solid wire like these. Your home appliances, because they carry so little voltage and because they need to be flexible, they make it out of this. But you can, like, this flexible wire, you could actually get away with a smaller gauge if it was not stranded, because AC, the way the AC reacts to things. So like that, all right, that's not too bad. In a minute here, you're going to be stuck seeing my big fat head in your way. Sorry again, if it hasn't been this entire time. As your rule of thumb, when you're hooking up electricity, you want to hook up positive first, then negative. When unhooking, you're going to unhook negative, then unhook positive. It allows the electricity to have a place to go in case bad things happen. So, I don't know how that feels. I might end up pulling this breaker out of it and figure out how the hell it comes out. Of course, by the time my face gets in the way to be able to see what I'm doing, it blocks all the light. Don't back these out too far. If you back them out too far, you will be buying yourself a new breaker and you will be pissed, because the stupid things are expensive. You'll feel like they'll want to stop and just let them stop. Don't force them. Do not force it out. You will not get it back in. Just gonna feel around a little bit. Feels about right there. Setting this bad boy in. Make sure you pay attention to which one you're putting it into. This should have its own dedicated circuits. You don't want... this is why we pull and check. Fuck, doing it the other way. Just had to wiggle it a little bit to get it out of there. You know, if we were hooked up to the grid at all, anything like that, it would not be nearly as crazy as I am about sticking my hands in here and crap, but considering the circumstances, the risk is very low. Actually, I'm going to show you this. I if you'll be able to see. There we go. So you can see there's a little gap in there, and there's not a huge gap. And that wire, I mean, if you look at that wire, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in there to squeeze that wire in. And that wire is just about the max size for that. So, again, if it was solid wire, you just jab it in there and call it a day. This is stranded wire. So you want to make sure you get a nice twist on it, and you just kind of work it in there and find exactly where it needs to be. Hold it in there while you do this. This is the other reason why I like to have crimps on the ends, is because it gives us something solid to grab to. Otherwise, these wires kind of want to splay all over the place in there. Got to grab that time. Now these, you got a little hook here that hooks like that onto that bar there. So I'm going to just stick it in there at an angle like this, and it'll snap in. Let's see here. Do white next, just because it's kind of already right there. I work generally furthest away from my point of entry to the closest. I don't know. It just keeps things out of the way. I can't see crap. Got it where I want it. Don't move. Don't you move. Don't you move, you bastard. I'm not loving the screws that they use on this. Had I actually paid attention before I started working on this, I would have gone down to the shop and I would have gotten the right damn bits to do this. Now the other thing is maybe I should trim this back a little bit, but knowing that this is probably going to come out of here again at some point, and because I have wiggle room in here, I'm not too stressed about it. I'm gonna shoot you. There we go. Shoot you up. You son of a bitch. In doing electrical, you are not allowed to drink during electrical. You're allowed to drink after electrical. Now, if you're doing plumbing, mechanical, things like that, you can drink during. Electrical is one of those things that is just a little bit more risk involved, a little bit more, more risk. You just gotta pay attention a little bit more. And hope, pray. All right, so I'm gonna stuff this back down in here a little ways. Just gonna get it out of the way. I'm not gonna be able to put the cover on, unfortunately. The dog has been mostly smart enough not to come over here. I might take painter's tape and just kind of tape the cover over it, just to kind of have something in front of it. But I'll show you these screws. Again, hopefully we can see them. Where's my little flashlight? There it is. If you can see these screws, it might be a little bit better. But if you can see these screws, if it'll focus, they like have a square head in them, and I'm guessing it's probably a number 2 square head or some bonkers thing. And then the flat head that's there, it's kind of a massive flat head. So I don't know if you can see it better on those. Just get the right tool for the job, or just know that play stupid games, get stupid prizes. So when you get ready to turn your power all back on, I got a bunch of these that are turned on right now. I'll probably click everything off, just to be on the safe side. I'll bring up 12 volt first, just because lower risk. If something's wrong here, which it shouldn't be, and we got, that says positive, red is positive. We come back in here, it says positive there if you get some decent lighting. Yeah, it says positive. It says negative up here. So, yeah, the colors should be right, but you don't always pay attention to the colors. You double check everything. Some knucklehead could have been working in here before you, somebody like me, and maybe they decided, having some whiskey while they drink or while they work is a good idea, and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, this is where we're at. We're going to throw 12 volt on first. All right, don't mind the mess. This place is a disaster area. Need to do some cleaning. I like my cookies. Ruba had her dinner. Ruba, no, like, this is exactly why you can't be there. Don't do stupid things. Ruba, hi. What do you... Your electrical certification ran out. You don't know what's going on. This is why we gotta put painter's tape. Tape that on there because she loves to lay here and under my desk and over there and pretty much anywhere you don't want her to be. Giving a quick feel to this, just to make sure, like nothing feels wonky. We only have half the power. We only got the DC power right now. So, I don't have high expectations of things going badly yet. The night is still young. Put this here. So we'll go ahead and fire up the generator and then start clicking things on and pray. Okay. So we can hear the generator running probably in the background. It's actually really quiet for its size. Like it's not a Honda generator, it's not whisper quiet, but it's quiet enough that it doesn't piss off everybody in the neighborhood. So hold on. So I know you really can't see it just because lighting sucks, but I've got a little meter here. If we zoom in and stuff. When it starts charging, it doesn't matter where it's charging from, but when it starts charging, it'll start flashing slowly, and it'll, the percentages, and you can kind of scroll through, and there's current amps out because you have the down arrow, so it's amps that it's using for all the lights and fridge and everything else that kicked on. And then there's your remaining amp hours. So when you first hook up your system, you can tell it how many amp hours you have, and then the shunt reads in and out and in and out. I suggest topping it off and checking it every so often. But it gives you a reasonable idea, and I think this was like $20-25. It wasn't even all that expensive. In regards to, you can't hardly see them, but you can kind of see the two blue dots and the little two blue gauges in there. Those are the two batteries. So right now they're nice and even. They're both running. We can see that. You can see that, but if you were to turn one off, so if you were to turn one of those batteries off because of the fact that they're set up in parallel onto a bus bar, it would backfeed your voltage back into the other battery and turn on the meter. Okay, and so double check your buttons. Like, I reach in there and the buttons, once you turn them on, they just kind of offset in a little bit. So when I feel them and I go, okay, yeah, that's in, that's working. Trying to remember what's what here. I've relabeled everything a dozen times. So we're going to go ahead and kick on main. It's going to allow power to flow into the actual bar. So that's bringing in power from the generator on these big wires back here. We're not going to worry about AC. The front cabinet outlet number 3, that one actually doesn't work right. I think one of two things happened. Either a wire got disconnected in one of the boxes up in there, and now it's not feeding the two that are, there's one inside there and one inside there. Whatever reason, they don't have electric, and they feed off it. That's the last place where there's electric from, is there's a outlet in there. So because we have a broken wire somewhere, whether it's because I put a drill bit through it when I was putting up solar panels, or whether just because it got unhooked, we're leaving that off until we sort it out. It's been like that for 1.5 years. Number 4 is our GFIs. This is going to be bathroom, kitchen, pretty much everything else. And then microwave is bottom. This is our converter, and this is Heard the generator kick on a little bit higher. We got a green light here. I'm just gonna hang out for a minute. I set it before I even got in here. I set it to 3-stage already. I just double checked it. It actually came in the fixed position. And then you're supposed to put an amp meter on, or a voltmeter on it and shit like that. Honestly, far too lazy for that. I turned the voltage all the way to one side, all the way to the other, figured out where the middle was, backed it off to about the middle. So we're in the ballpark. Being a 3-stage, it should be controlling both amperage and voltage anyways. So now we're going to come back over here. I can't tell if it's rain or if I'm hearing something else. I visually check literally everything in a case like this. Just give it a quick visual. Make sure everything looks normal. Now, this is 35 amp. So right now it's feeding about 18 amps into 19, 18, about 20 amps. That converter's feeding in. Lower than I was hoping, about what I expected. None of these chargers ever get a full amount, because what happens is that converter, when you think about this, that converter is feeding your panel first. So things like your 12-volt fridge, lights, radio, your furnace, your little fans, all that stuff is going to eat off of your amperage off of that first, and then the leftovers come back in here. Okay, so like I said, it's right now it's running like 16 and a half, 17, somewhere in that ballpark. If we were to go and turn on the heat, for instance, just crank this bad boy right up so it kicks on. Now you're going to see this drop down and down. It's actually not dropping down as much as I anticipated, or at all. Weird. We're going to go ahead and kill the heats. I mean, we're putting a pretty hefty. Let's see, it's around 16. This thing bounces everywhere. You saw how much that amperage was changing. That does not make me enthusiastic. That's a lot of bouncing. It's going from like 17, 8, 18, popped up to 19 for a hot minute, now it's down to 16. I like a nice smooth number when possible. Now the other thing I'm going to do, because these batteries are so low, is I am going to plug in that other charger. We'll see this come back up quite a bit. You'll see it in just a minute. It usually takes a hot second. So it's fuck for all nothing. There we go. 22, 23. Just climbing right at it. So this thing is putting out 25 degrees Celsius, 13.8 volts, 13 amps. On top of the 18 or so, we should be right about 30. That might go up or down depending on if things shut off and whatnot. Like I'm waiting for there goes the furnace. So theoretically it should pop up. It didn't. And I find this weird. Because if this charger is putting out about 15, which is what I expect. 16.4. The other one's rated at 35, and we should be at like 45. Not loving this. It's still going to be twice as fast as what was before. I'm may have to tinker with it a little bit though. So anyway, again, excuse the mess. So I'm going to just get a cover over this just so the dog doesn't lay up against it and zap herself. It's not exactly quiet, but it's not much louder than the old one was. It's cooking right along. And we'll keep a close eye on it. Turn the microwave back on. But we'll be keeping an eye on it for a couple of days. Wow, the fan already turned off. Fan turned off. You know, this is why we like meters. We're at 27. It seems like it's smoothed out significantly. 27. And this one's at 15. So things are smoothed out quite a bit suddenly. And it's still a little bouncy, but it's well within what I'd consider normal. So feel your wires, you know, in a safe place down here where there's no electricity. Feel your wires. Make sure nothing feels warm. You know, this one doesn't feel warm. This is your main lead. But because this is putting out so little, oh, there goes the fan again. So it's trying. Let's see how that affects this. So we'll get used to this over a couple of days, but we're just going to let this thing roll for a while. I've got to get up at least to 60% to be comfortable, which 111, 60%, you know, we're talking 20 amps, so less than an hour. Yeah, that's the converter. You know, but I'll show you guys some of the outside, you know, over the coming days. It's still raining.